पता है, जब मैंने ऑफिस का कंफर्टेबल जॉब छोड़कर सिजर उठाई तब सबने मेरा मजाक उड़ाया। टेलर बनना है, लोन कौन देगा? पर मैं कुछ बड़ा करने के लिए चल पड़ी। इसीलिए अपनी सेविंग्स एक मजबूत धागे से पिरो के रखती गई। बड़ी पहचान बनाने के लिए एक छोटा कदम, हर महीने एक एसआईपी अपने बिजनेस के नाम। सपनों का कोई साइज नहीं होता, बस उनमें प्रोग्रेस करने का जुनून होना चाहिए। जहां सोच है वहां सपना, और जहां सपना है वहां एसआईपी। एसआईपी करे आपका सपना इन प्रोग्रेस।
म्यूचुअल फंड निवेश बाजार जोखिम के अधीन है। योजना संबंधी सभी दस्तावेजों को सावधानी से पढ़ें।
Hello everyone, a very warm welcome to you on today's panel discussion, Women and Wealthily Wise. Why women must take investing seriously and how mutual funds may help in this investment journey. An initiative by Mirae Asset Mutual Fund. The bottom line is more women are part of the workforce now, and gone are the days when women are mute spectators of where the family's money is invested. Today's women have a greater say in financial decisions, and rightly so. Several global findings say women investors consistently outperform their male counterparts. Perhaps women spend more time on research, or because they take more calculated risks. But it's also a fact that a large section of women are still hesitant about investing. A recent Women and Money Power Survey 2022 reveals that only 7% women in India invest independently through self-learning. No wonder women have far more savings lying in their bank accounts than men do, according to a report by none other than Reserve Bank of India. I'm your host Manisha Natarajan, and that's exactly what I will delve into with my esteemed all-women panel of experts. How do we, the women, turn our savings into smart investments? And what is the role that mutual funds can play in this journey? Let me start with the introduction. Soumya Rajan, on my immediate left, Founder and Chief Executive Officer of Waterfield Advisors. Sanchita Mukherji, Co-Founder and Partner at Blue Edge Associates, Managing Partner, Talk the Walk Mutual Fund Distributor as well. Arpita, Vinay, Co-CEO, Spark Private Wealth Management, and Suranjana, Borthakur, National Head Banks and NDs at Mirae Asset Investment Managers. Thank you all for taking out the time. I know some of you flown down from Mumbai, so that's even more exciting. So yeah, let me start with some of your experiences. You've been advising families, you've interacted with women in these families. Has there been a shift, and is that shift enough for them to take charge of their financial future?
So when I first started the company, what I saw is that mostly men were taking the decisions in terms of how the wealth would be managed. But what I've seen over the last 10 years is a greater awareness amongst women to take charge of their finances. And when you look at some interesting statistics, one is that today globally, women control about 30% of the global wealth. What's also interesting is that in a 10-year period between 2018 to 2027, we're going to see a transition of wealth, which is close to about 4 trillion. And one of the major beneficiaries of that inheritance is actually going to be women. So it's extremely important that women start having a good understanding of how to manage their finances.
Sanchita, what's been your experience overall? You know, I have a circle of friends who I feel sometimes don't even want to look at them. They're phenomenal multitaskers, all professional women, doctors, professors. But when it comes to managing money, they're like, can someone else do it for me? Has that been your experience? Do you see it more in older women and the younger women are changing?
So to answer your question straight off the bat, why the hesitation, right? Why the 7% women investors? So let's understand this better. I think in today's date, the traditional roles have blurred. Timelines have blurred. A woman is no longer, say, just a caregiver or a housewife or a somebody in the background of the family. A woman is a mother, sister, daughter, corporate honcho, a media person, a manufacturing background person. Women are multifaceted, right? And yet, I feel a lot of cultural and a lot of geographical fabric goes into the hesitation of the woman till date. I think it's all about the woman's relationship with money. So in today's family setup, if you see, we have progressed as a nation from a joint family background wherein, say, it was taboo to even talk about money and finances at the dinner table, because the woman would feel that it might lead to a certain level of mistrust with other family members or a discord with your partner or your spouse. Today, in a nuclear family setup, that is no longer the case, right? Discussions on money, on succession, children's upbringing, these are all being very proactively looked at. When you talk about Lakshmi, the word Lakshmi is derived from the word Lakshya. Women are also very, very goal-centric, right? So if you give a very multifaceted woman goals in her life, her children's education, her own retirement planning, in case of a loss in the family, very, very circumstantial situations, a woman is forced to look and start a relationship with money.
That you're saying it's not a natural, tendency for women to start managing their money, but something happens or triggers that need, then women do step in. At least that change you've seen.
Absolutely. In fact, there's a very stereotypical phrase that I will quote, that women save, men invest.
Okay, we have to change that. Yes. Women save, men invest. Okay, we are going to try and flip that for all of you today. Hopefully, after seeing this discussion, that's not going to happen. Arpita, give me your experience on why is there a hesitation still? Why are we still playing around with a 7% number? Why are we still saying that women have more money in their bank, which should actually be invested to grow, right?
Sure.
Why is that still happening? What are the barriers we need to cross?
I think, the sort of data that you quoted about women through their self-learning, only 7% of them take their decisions. And the most often the asset classes that they tend to veer towards are the tried and tested ones, including fixed deposits, even chit funds and gold. But if you were to put one more, and I'll come to the point post that, one more layer of working women, about 73% of the working women invest, and about 49% of them invest in capital assets, capital market linked assets, whether in mutual funds or stocks or NPS. So I think that sort of says a lot. When there's an access to money and there's a familiarity with investments, the confidence to do that goes up multi-fold. And I think that's one of the biggest, anecdotally as well, that's one of the biggest sort of changes that we are seeing. The choice of the investment or asset class will actually does not change vis-a-vis the gender, the goal that you're working towards, the investment horizon that you have, the familiarity that you have. But I think once you have access to investments and you're familiar with it, the confidence to take decisions is much higher. And if I could make a point on, what Sanchita mentioned, in terms of men invest, and actually if I were to look at that in a very different context, India, we don't have a lot of history or data on a 10-year track record. But Fidelity did a study over a 10-year period and found that women investors actually outperformed the men by a 0.4%. Okay. Wells Fargo said that risk-adjusted returns for women far higher. University of California, Berkeley said about 1% more. And I think I find it quite intuitive, because what you need to be an investor in capital markets, patience, having a sense of anchoring and making deliberate choices and not getting sort of excited about everything that comes your way, and being disciplined about it. I think that sort of is very, and that's playing to your strengths. So for women who invest, I think the experience has been a lot more positive. Getting there is
Is a journey.
Is a journey.
Needs to be taken. In fact, adding to what Arpita has said, Suranjana, the mutual fund data, I mean, of course, mutual funds have exploded post-COVID, right? The investments in capital markets through mutual funds has been a phenomenal change in India and unprecedented. And the number of women-held portfolios has also doubled, right? That's happening. That change is happening.
Yeah, I think while that change is happening, I think what is important in all the conversation that's come out is that decision making is not done by women a lot of times. You know, what happens is women tend to just, the role of financial planning in the household has been very typecasted for men. It's like it's assumed that it's the man of the house who will decide. Also, the number of women who are investing, less than 1/3 of them are actually making the decisions on their own. While they may be making a lot of other very, significant decisions at home, there is a data which says that about 80% of decision when it comes to children's education is taken by women. 70% of, all household-related decisions are taken by women. Even, holidays, etc., 55-60% of decisions are women. But when it comes to investing in a financial product or maybe buying a house or some decision like that, the involvement of the woman goes down substantially. I think one reason could also be that, women tend to earn lesser than their male counterparts. So a lot of times there is also, there is a survey which says that about 58% of working women, save less than 10% of their salary, what they're earning. So where, maybe their tendency to learn more is also lesser. But what happens is, I think the fact that what Sanchita mentioned, normalizing talking about money management at home, normalizing talking about investment decisions at home is extremely essential. I think that's where the awareness comes in. And then mutual fund can play a very large role in these kind of issues that I've just spoken about, because mutual funds are a very affordable route to invest. You don't have to have a lot of women feel that they don't have enough money to invest. So if they want to start off with mutual fund, you can start off with a very small quantum.
Absolutely.
Mutual fund also is, you're actually leaving the decision to the experts. So you don't have to be an expert necessarily when you're making the decision. You can give it to a fund manager. It is also a very liquid option that's there. I think in India, one very important part of mutual fund is also that it's a very egalitarian solution because it doesn't differentiate between a small investor and a large investor. I think everybody gets the fund manager's expertise, so it's
I think that's a very interesting point of looking at mutual funds. It's very egalitarian. You might have 1,000 rupees to invest, or you might have like 10 lakhs. It's the fund manager is not going to be able to distinguish between or differentiate between what he does with your money. Soumya, you wanted to add a point.
I wish to come in to really say that sometimes we confuse financial independence and financial literacy.
Absolutely.
And what we see with a lot of women, whether they're professionals, entrepreneurs, or inheritors, is that they have the money, but they don't really have the financial literacy to be able to make those decisions. And even to the point on mutual funds, when you look at when you mentioned, Manisha, that you've seen the number of investors or women investors has actually increased. I think the data point for me, which is very relevant, is when you look at the age groups of the investors. And what you see is that the maximum number or increase in the 18 to 24-year-olds is over 300% in that period. When you look at the 25 to the 35-year-old, it's more than 100%. So what it's telling you in some ways is that it's the younger women investors who are coming into the workforce, who have the money, who want to actually explore opportunities to invest rather than necessarily having someone else tell them what to do.
So let's then focus on, are they doing a great job with their money, right? In terms of this, you are financially free. Are you financially literate? How are you going about investing in, or investing your entire money or savings is a very big question, but you have something to add, and then we will move into the direction of just the basic tenets of investing wisely.
Excellent. I'll just jump right into where Soumya ended in terms of the age categories. And I have to speak about the digitization of India. You know, after the immense success of UPI and the digitization of financial services, a lot of women investors, to address the hesitancy, the financial literacy, the knowledge, the accessibility, the understanding, all of these needs are actually being met through a lot of digital apps, wherein you have large communities supporting, spreading investor awareness, giving you data points, and breaking down technical jargons into more accessible bites, which is understood by women investors. So I think that has created a tremendous kind of a penetration in the millennial women investors who are joining the workforce in large numbers.
Okay, so let's then move to the fact that if they're investing already, are they investing wisely? Arpita, you know, there are basic tenets of investments. Let's start with compounding, right? Because sometimes we feel that, you know, you should keep the money for 5 years, you have short-term goals, long-term goals. Very pleasantly, I discovered, someone called me up and said, we have a fund of yours which you had invested with us in 2003. My son was born that time. So I remember some money had come through gifts and we put 10,000. And after 7 months of SIPs, I actually forgot about it. I don't even remember what happened. And I was pleasantly surprised to know that 70,000 has grown in 2023 to 23 lakh rupees. Right?
Wow.
18.8% in a mutual fund.
Wow. Yeah.
Fill it, shut it, forget it. So even that sort of a thing. So tell me, when you go out and advise your clients and specifically women, are there any specifics that you tell them which makes for a very good layered way of building your wealth?
I think I'll just share an interesting anecdote. The first time I got introduced to the concept of compounding is when I was little. My mother used to do something called recurring deposits. You know, I know, keeping away something every month, and when you add it up, it was quite lower than the amount that you would see in bank deposits. So it was very intuitive, but actually first-hand experienced what the benefit of compounding is like. And when we get into the basic tenets, and you know, when you speak to investors, women included, your ability to handle volatility depends on what's the cushion that you really have. Get the foundation with whatever amount of money that you need for your peace of mind. There are no thumb rules there, but and put it in less volatile asset class. Okay with even a fixed deposit, but that's not your maximizing your return. You're maximizing your peace of mind. And then get into a layered, the easiest and the most foundational part of building a portfolio would be discipline, some amount of it monthly, maybe even in a index fund, or you know, whatever is the most cost efficient or one of the large cap funds. So you're putting away, you know, therefore timing the market and everything, very interesting but very difficult to do. So regular SIP in a large cap or an index fund over a period of time, great way to get exposure to a risk asset. And then the elements of on a risk adjusted basis where you can, and depending on the familiarity and the corpus, and there is, you know, add in a flavor of small mid cap. I think India is still the bottom up stock picking, and the amount of wealth that gets created there is substantial. I mean, do it with a manager who has seen market cycles. Look at the unlisted market, the amount of wealth creation that's happened. India is the third largest number of unicorns globally. And, you know, our ability to participate in that is very, very sort of limited and restricted. So things like that on a risk-adjusted return, you know.
So basically what I'm hearing is that, you know, have some money for your peace of mind that can lie in a bank. And if you're starting your journey of investment, start with, and you have a long-term horizon, start with an index fund or a, you know, a large cap fund, which will probably give you a very soft start, correct, to building long-term wealth, correct. And then look at the riskier assets like the small cap and mid cap funds. Soumya?
To look at the framework, I think the first thing you need to do when you have an investment portfolio is what are the goals and what are the financial goals that you're actually trying to achieve. And you set that in a way in which you create what we often call an investment policy statement. And that really is defining the boundaries or your risk boundaries in some ways. After that, the next step that you look at, and which Arpita mentioned, is really to have this concept of what we call risk pools. So you know that different pools of capital are assigned a certain risk weighted in your mind, saying that this portion is going to be very safe and I'm not going to touch it. It's going to be in a fixed deposit. And the other parts of the portfolio is what you will take risk on. Once you've done that, then you look at asset allocation. And once you've got the asset allocation piece, you then look at fund manager selection. Fund manager selection is where the mutual funds will come in, and you'll say which of the schemes which are right. And you're always looking for the most consistent performer. And the last thing you look at is the cost of investment, because that also plays a very large role, because if you're going to be paying out a lot of fees or distribution fees or otherwise, then you're not allowing compounding to actually happen, because it's coming out ultimately out of the returns. So when you look at your investments, you should think about it as what are the goals, what is the kind of risk appetite that I have in risk pools, what is the asset allocation, what is the fund manager selection, and last is the cost.
The cost and of course the time horizon that you have. Time horizon. What are you building your wealth for? What money do you need in 10 years, 15 years, 20, 25 years? So Ranjana, it's honestly, if you've got consistent performance over a 10, 12-year period, it's automatically such an indicator of what one can expect when you're investing in that particular fund. But add to what Soumya has said in terms of how do you sense? Are people really going into this level of granular strategy, or are they just saying, this is a fintech platform, I've seen, so many of them are out there, this fund is today being spoken about, and that's something which I've always had a problem with. The 1-year returns on these fintech platforms and websites are really not the right way to judge a fund, is it?
Yeah, I think, Manisha, what you're talking about is a very important point. This 1-year return, or looking at a shorter time horizon, may really not be the correct way of looking or evaluating or any product, so to say. It's not just mutual funds. It's a long-term consistency. It is a long-term, what has been the history, how is the fund manager delivered, what has been the background of the fund manager, how has he been managing all these other products. I think that's a better way of looking at things. But unfortunately in India, a lot of times people still do look at a very short-term horizon, but that is where, I think the advisor plays a very important role. That is where the advisor would tell you, what not to look at. What to look at is something, your decision, but what not to look at is also very important. I think that's something that, everybody present here who's an advisor plays a very, very important role.
Go ahead. Jump right in.
To add to what Suranjana mentioned, the short-term performance is one thing, but in general, hindsighting is the biggest sort of blind spot that most investors, face. It's great for you to look at the last 1 year, 3 year, 5 year performance. Statistically, the chances of that repeating is very, very low, especially if it's a top quartile fund. There's a very little to low probability of that repeating over a 3-5 year period. So hindsighting, and it's easier said than done. It's not only India, it's most investors. The conversations around performance.
Then Arpita, what yardstick do you go with? Then there is, if you can't hindsight, can't see consistency, and you don't know,
So consistency,
you can't even get into new funds especially as a starting investor. How do you then benchmark and how do you decide?
Okay, so 2 different parameters. Hindsighting, using the past performance as, which is the most cliched one, as indicator. Even though it's blaring from every single advertisement, but that's how investor minds work. Consistency being a different parameter, that, how have you managed the volatility? So I think if the past performance is not something that you can reliably depend on, a large part of investment decision, and maybe I'll make it contemporary to the way things are working out. There was a certain theme that worked for the last decade. There were certain kind of sectors and economy, the way it worked in the last decade versus how it's going to be in the coming decade, which looks like it'll be a lot more capex-led. which is, and you know, obviously government has done its bit and the private sector companies are picking it up. The kind of companies that will do well here versus what we did that in last decade in a very simplified, in a like a really, really simple manner. It's very difficult to then expect the winners of the past to sort of replicate going forward. So a big part of your decision making is also the market context and the fund manager's skills to be able to manage that. I don't think the skill changes. You know, people are good at doing what they do over a longer period of time. Your ability to fit that to what your understanding of the market context is where an advisor's role comes in. And I think
I was just going to say, so at the end of it, I think there is a lot of merit, especially if you're trying to build long-term wealth, to get an advisor who understands the changing market dynamics, what are the themes of the future. And you're right. I mean, if you look globally, the themes of last 10 years, there are very few companies which is, you know, continue to stand as winners into the next 10 years. I think she wanted to add a point, but Sanchita?
Very quickly, one would be the consistency, which benchmark and all of the technicalities of it. The second very relevant question I feel, which a lot of women come to me asking is, how do we simplify? Where do we begin with? You are inundated with so much of information, you know, 24/7 noise all around you. Where do you even begin with? Right? So answer that very specific, because you know 80% of investing is behavioral science.
Yeah.
Right? So how do you cut through this noise? So my only take on this is, you as a woman investor, as a first-time woman investor, you need to start small, gain confidence, gain education, stay wise, seek advice,
And read.
Go for advice, don't hesitate, educate, all of that, and then build up to scale. So simplification is, I think, something that all women really crave for and aim for in today's day.
And partly why they stay away from money management is because they say we're already, you know, they are multitasking and they don't want to get into one more thing. You wanted to say something, Suranjana?
Yeah, I think while, you know, the product where you invest or what is the, you know, last, I think a lot of times the question is always, what should I invest in? When I speak to a lot of women, but
That is my first question that I'm asked.
Yeah,
I'm, you know, I mean, the only question I'm ever asked by all my women friends and the younger women who are joining media is, give us some names to invest. And I'm padhe na likhe, but give us some names to invest.
Yeah, but I think the important part here is the journey, not the, you know, what to invest, how to go about it, what is the process. The fact that, you know, I hear a lot of my friends, I ask them, you know, are you doing your investing? So their answer is, I'm not good at math. He's good at math. He, in this case, could be the spouse. And so he takes the financial decisions. But investing is not about being good at math. It's about having a process. It's about being disciplined. It is about, you know, having an entire plan laid out, which you then stick to. And once you have followed that process, what's been mentioned on, you know, probably starting early, the fact that you need to have your goals clear, you need to know why you are investing before what you are investing into. And then maybe start with simple products, you know, you don't have to get into the most complex one first, like you mentioned on index or ETF investing. These are segments you can start with and then stay committed to what you have laid out as a plan. I think that's extremely important. It's always not going to be the last part, you know, what product I should invest in. It's the process which is the
I know. And again, to reiterate, that's what most people will come and ask all the financial advisors, and even someone like me who keeps oneself fairly informed about what's happening in personal finance. Soumya, elaborate. So we've done all the basics, right? Let's move on to one or two strategies which have worked for you exceptionally well, or any of your clients which has worked exceptionally well.
I think one strategy that has worked for me personally is compounding, which is really that, starting early, and as advisors, we are always managing the behavior of our clients and investors. You have to actually tell them to pause and just stay still in an investment when things are going a little awry. Now, and when you look at just the maths behind it, every time you make a decision to move something out of your portfolio and to switch, the probability of going wrong is the same as the probability of going right. So the more times you keep making those decisions, the higher is the probability of getting a bad outcome than if you were to just stay still. So as a woman investor, for me, the biggest learning has been take your time to diligence the investment, take your time to do your research. But once you've done that and you're committed to an investment, stay with the investment without the noise coming in.
And the emotional sways which
comes with.
Well, that brings me to the biggest mistake I've made is trying to time the market and exiting at the worst time of the market once with my entire equity portfolio. And the notional loss hasn't yet got covered. I mean, it's been 4-5 years, but that notional loss of making that switch has not been easy. On the behavioral aspect, right? So one is stay put. Once you've taken decisions, stay put. Don't try and churn your portfolio very often. Is there anything that you advise your
So to begin with, I'm not an advisor, I'm a mutual fund
distributor, correct?
But taking all these snippets from this conversation, sometimes
as a distributor, I'm sure you're also advising, right? I mean, when they come to you,
it's very for mutual fund distributors. However, having said that, as a woman investor, I've always felt the need to simplify is the greatest.
simple products,
Absolutely.
clean
And
products.
they also
Within mutual funds, also simple products.
They work the best in the longest holding period without complicating your life. What I've understood is, just when I started off investing, all at the age of 19, so unfortunately, 19.
You beat us all. I think so, right?
So unfortunately, there were testing times. My father passed away very early through a terminal illness. And that's when that was my first initiation into capital markets. What are shares? What is life insurance? I did my first real estate deal for my family, all of that. And I understood, hey, you know what? I need to consolidate. That's when I actually realized that mutual funds are a great vehicle for diversification, for generating an alpha on the market, for understanding, for even a college student like myself to cut through all of this noise and understand what is an asset product, what is an asset class, what are all of this, and how do I stay true to myself. One size does not fit, different floats for different boats, right? So speculation doesn't work. These questions that give me a tip, these answers, we have all in our journeys.
So I must say, women generally don't ask for tips that easily. They say, product bata do. Tell us which mutual fund. That's what I'm hearing. Men will come and ask you, give us a hot tip in the stock market.
Have that little speculative portfolio that they trade in and all of that.
So you're
the joy of
simplifying, and mutual funds are a great way to simplify
and diversify.
And diversify, different. You get so many stocks, and you can not only do stocks, you can do debt. There are debt mutual funds, you can do hybrid.
And think about it, it's a very transparent industry. We have a great regulator. It's all out there. Every information, cost, pricing, knowledge, communities, awareness, accessibility. It's a fantastic period we're in. So,
Arpita? What I'd like to understand from you is just this whole psychological behavioral thing, because really saving and growing your investments is not about how much you earn, but how your relationship with that money is. And everyone talks about that aspect. What are some of the things that you would say are important to keep in mind?
Sure. No, obviously, I think as Soumya mentioned, it's not for nothing that compounding is called the eighth miracle. So starting early, staying committed to the decision, I think there's no way to highlight or amplify how important that is, but added to that, and that might be slightly a different take on the entire thing, is fill it, shut it, forget it, is relevant to the decision to invest. But I think staying contemporary is very important.
Yeah, okay, of course.
So while you decision to stay invested, staying committed to that, but also being very committed to reviewing it on an ongoing basis, ensuring that the reason why you took that decision, if there's something fundamentally that changes, you've got to look at the portfolio again.
How often do you think one should review their mutual fund portfolio? So let me ask that. Do you advise once a year? Or is that too short a period?
No, once a year is good. Actually, once in half a year is good too. But less than that is you may, it's important to understand what's worked for you, okay, and then take a decision not to change it at all. But then say, and reviewing is not equal to not being committed to your investments. And
I'm just getting a validation for what I do. You've just said I do it once a year. Thank you. Once a year. So will it, shut it and forget it was only that one, SIP which I'd forgotten about, which
that's fantastic. That's fantastic.
But yes, once a year review is.
That applies hugely to the decision to invest. You've got to stay invested. But I think the point that which you yourself practice as an investor, reviewing it, I think makes all the difference.
I'm going to just delve into the stay invested part, Suranjana, with you a little bit more. And the reason why I do it is because last 3 years, you've seen this phenomenal increase in mutual fund portfolios. The markets have, of course, post-COVID recovered phenomenally. We've seen a bull run like never before, a very short bull run. And there could be periods of uncertainty going ahead. You might actually see a downside in your portfolio. So that's when that psychological grit comes, doesn't it? On not getting swayed by short-term movements.
Yeah, I think, you had asked a question to Soumya on, some learning that you've had or something that you did differently. I think, that for me, a big learning has been the asset allocation thing. Personally, this is, earlier,
I'm so glad you picked it up because I'd actually missed it. Not everything can go into equity mutual funds, right?
So, I used to feel for the longest time that I am a very aggressive investor. So I mostly need equity in my portfolio. I do not need the other asset classes too much. A little bit of
They're
it is
boring.
okay, yeah.
And
they'll not be able to compound enough for me, etc. But what I think COVID was actually a scenario where this became even louder, though I did realize the impact of this earlier, but I think COVID was very, very clear where there are dramatic differences that come in the market, dramatic corrections that come. If you do not have enough money to actually deploy in the asset class that you love, then there is no point of your planning for years, So I think that's something which was a big takeaway for me, and I do not now discount any other asset class. There are different asset classes. Women tend to love a lot of, fixed deposit, debt, or maybe, even gold for that matter. Everything has its place in everybody's portfolio. There is no portfolio that is complete if you have not taken exposure to different asset classes. So I think that's a very...
No, I think even for risk, you may begin if you're very young, you're starting to invest in your 20s. An index fund might be the best way to start, but as you grow your money, it's hard to keep it all in equities. I mean, it's not even advisable unless you have tons and tons of wealth that you inherited from your family.
True. But I think another point around the asset allocation is around inflation.
Yes.
So we often forget that we need to be able to create a portfolio that actually sees us at least making some real returns in the longer term. I see a lot of investors very happy with just absolute returns that they'll get, never really benchmarking it against inflation. So their money is not really growing for them. So that's where I think advisors can come in to really help them in what is the right strategic asset allocation that they need.
In fact, this happens with real estate a lot, hard asset, right? We bought that house or we bought that piece of land for, 10 lakhs in 20 years ago and now it's 2 crores. But excuse me, have you looked at what that
Could have done
the amount of money you would have done in another asset, or have you put it on an Excel sheet to see what returns those are? So yeah.
I'd just very quickly add on to the inflation. I'm so glad she mentioned it. So whilst inflation, the CPI inflation, 5-6%, all of that, a lot of women do understand in today's date and time. Education inflation, for example, it's 11-12%.
Oh yes.
It's double digit. So when you're talking about your child's education fund, the whole approach is very different there. How do you beat 11-12% education inflation? So that's where the asset allocation comes in very handy.
Yeah. So it's not just the 5-6% of consumer price inflation that you have to beat. You actually have to look at your real goals.
Absolutely.
And then beat that inflation and grow your money. So Yeah, that's a very, very important point.
On asset allocation, while it sounds daunting, having ability to have a view across all asset classes and how do you decide with the proportion and all of that. And I think that's again somewhere mutual funds are playing a great role because they've been able to productize that. So for a first-time investor who's really not sure about how to go about it, there's a flurry of options from balanced funds and balanced advantage funds and so on and so forth, where you have someone experienced in the market taking that decision. A lot of it quantitative, a lot of it his own assessment as well. But I think that's a fantastic way as the first product as well. A productized asset
Some
allocation.
debt, you have some equity, and looking at how the economy is, the fund manager himself will move around your money.
Yeah. So let the complexity not daunt you.
Yeah.
That's a great way to get started as well.
I agree, absolutely. Suranjana, you wanted to add something?
I think asset allocation, while it's a very important part, I think one thing which is also very important is the risk appetite. Because a lot of times, so there are two types of risk. There is the market risk. The market is carrying a certain type of risk. There is also an individual's risk. And mostly this is associated with the age of the person. But sometimes what happens, it's the goal what you're investing for. Somebody who is at a later stage of their life also may have a larger risk appetite because maybe they're not investing only for themselves, they're investing for the next generation. So that risk appetite is something for yourself you need to recognize, and what is it that you can actually take from the market also is something that you need.
I've seen that with my father. I mean, in a government job, we had very little risk appetite when we were all growing up. And suddenly, after all the children had got settled, he had surplus money and then suddenly became a very active equity investor. all my responsibilities are done. Let me now grow my money, and managed to do very well on that. So, yes. All right, let me conclude with one parting statement from, I think we've touched on asset allocation, we've touched on starting to invest early, compounding, those are non-negotiables, also understanding your risk, putting a framework of investment with your goals in mind and then taking a decision. And honestly, I believe that the first time when you start your journey, it's good to go to a financial advisor. Despite the fact that I study so much, I still have a full-time financial advisor who takes a look at my portfolio and discusses it with me every year. Just one parting shot or a parting comment for everyone who's joining. And I hope it's not just women who are going to be seeing this webinar. It's also going to be the men who are going to encourage their partners to become financially smart when it comes to investments. Last comment, like they say. Last but not the least.
I would say being a lifelong student and learner in financial markets, because there is volatility, it is the real world. You do need to not really delegate this to someone else as a woman or even any investor. You do need to keep abreast of.
So while it can be simplified, that does not give you an excuse to do it blindly.
That's correct.
I think
Absolutely. You need to know what you're doing.
Let me jump to Suranjana now. I'm going linear too often.
Yeah, I think what she said is important. The fact that, what I started with, probably the thought that, it's important that the decision making is with the women. It's not just the investment which is in the name of the lady. Also the fact that you should start early. I think that's an extremely important part. Invest wisely with a purpose in mind, and then start simple, but at least start. I think that's the thought I would like to leave.
I fully agree. If there was just like one sentence that there was, start, just get started, take the first baby step at something that you really understand or not, a regular investment in a index fund, you really can't, if you have a 5-year plus horizon, you really can't go wrong with.
And I think be done right away.
Yeah.
And have some surplus money, it can be done right.
Yeah, because as someone mentioned, inflation is something that you're not looking at, but it's really eating at what you think is protecting your money is not happening. So I think just getting started in a country like India, huge, buoyancy in markets. If you have a 10-15-year horizon, just get started. And second, specifically for women, we live longer.
Yes.
in most places where people you earn less. I think our lifestyle expenses are higher. You've got to invest. You've got to start.
We love our sarees. I wish I wore one today, but we love our sarees.
I think just get started.
So you live longer, and you probably, unfortunately, the gender pay parity is not yet there.
Yeah.
So you may earn lesser, so you need to make your money work harder.
Yes.
Right? So
And confidence comes from being familiar. So do invest the time, and as digitization has actually helped a lot. I think we're able to take important decisions like finding your partner online. I think getting access to financial information and using that to empower it. There's a lot out there. It's a lot more conducive.
You can do it. You can reach.
So just go start and get started, ladies.
Sanchita?
Right, absolutely. So 3 bullet points for the aspirational, educated woman of India today, who's doing very well for herself. 3 bullet points. Start small, think big, don't wait, educate, stay wise, seek advice.
Good Lord. Taken away all my best words. I could have just said goodbye at that stage. Well, thank you so much, ladies, for being here today, all of you. I mean, I know that we were just meandering through one topic or the other, and the good part was that we've covered everything that is required to actually become women and wealthily wise, why women must take investing seriously. This initiative was brought to you by Mirae Asset Mutual Fund, and hopefully, if you have any questions after that, you can drop us an email and we'll get back to you. That brings us to the end of today's discussion. This has been a truly exciting discussion with absolute gems as insights. Before we sign off, I would like to thank Mirae Asset Mutual Fund for partnering with us for today's session. Until next time, stay well and take care.
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risk. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.